Hello everyone and welcome to Sunburned. Albino ranks every Fire Emblem game he's played from worst to best, which is pretty much every Western release since Blazing Sword, which we Americans just know as Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance. This list does not include Fire Emblem Heroes or Warriors because they're not like real Fire Emblem games and I'm not interested in them at all. I'll tell you what is on the list, though, so you don't tell me I forgot something, even though you're still gonna, and that's Fire Emblem, Sacred Stones, Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn, the Shadow Dragon DS remake, Awakening, Fates bundled as just one thing, the Echoes remake, and Three Houses. I know they re-released OG Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light on Switch, and I tried it, but I barely got through 3 chapters. This series has modernized a ton since its heyday, and playing the super old ones feels like I'm looking at a rough draft of the franchise I'm not supposed to see. We'll talk about how well the DS remake did shortly. I can go back a decent amount. For instance, not to spoil the list, but I do still enjoy Blazing Sword and Sacred Stones. But anything before that is like, nah. Anyway, let's get on with it, starting from worst and working our way to best. Number worst, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon DS Remake. I thought about just not even putting this game on the list because I played so little of it out of complete disinterest. It just didn't hook me at all. The DS version adds a little prologue I barely remember, and I guess the word is improves the graphics, but the character models look like weird dolls and the mechanics are still ancient compared to other games. I have the least to say about this game, but I'll go more in depth about all the others. Number 8, Fire Emblem Echoes Remake. What's worse, a game I barely played because it was so unremarkable, or a game I played half of and predominantly despised? This is another remake of a beyond old game, but I got much more invested in this one by virtue of how upset I was at almost everything that was happening in it. The mechanics are vastly different. It's a remake of a Famicom game, for God's sake, Fire Emblem Gaiden, which is like 11 years older than Fire Emblem on Game Boy Advance, and apparently had a bunch of unique, aka bad, mechanics they never used again. Firstly, the game starts you off with like 5 or 6 characters that are all the same pre-class, kind of like the commoners and nobles from Three Houses, which is fine, but then when they level up enough to select their chosen starter class, like Archer or Soldier, the Mercenary class gives insane stat growth just for picking it, while none of the other classes give you squat, so it's like, do I want my skill and speed stats to stay at 3 as a shitty soldier, or would I enjoy if they were 8 and 10 for free? So then it's like, why would I not pick 5 mercenaries who can actually fight, especially since your stat growths are so neutered in old games, like you're lucky if 2 stats go up when you gain a level. Mages have a fixed hit rate of 80, which I hate, and they use their own HP to attack, which I hate, and you can only change class in predetermined locations on the map, which I hate, and the game has levels where it repeatedly spawns witches that can literally teleport right up your ass from anywhere and still attack on the same turn, which I hate, and they also have necro dragons that are very difficult for most units who aren't named Celica to kill, so of course there are levels where those endlessly spawn as well, which I hate, and honestly it's the most unfair Fire Emblem game I've ever played. The remake added Mila's turn wheel to be able to undo mistakes if you get one of your characters killed, but in a game with witches that don't care how you moved your units, they'll literally just automatically go say hi to your weakest character and double tap them like a zombie headshot. Being able to turn back time just means the same thing will happen a different way. Obviously the game isn't unbeatable, but that's a mountain I don't care if I never finish climbing. Echoes is just a straight bullshit experience front to back. Now that I think about it, pretend I put it as the worst. I'm not changing the order because of how I already wrote these paragraphs and tied them to each other, but Echoes is the worst, for sure. If I was held at gunpoint and forced to replay either this or Shadow Dragon, I'd pick Shadow Dragon in a hot second. I never want to see witches again. Number 7, Fire Emblem Blazing Sword. Blazing Blade? Google's confused me now. Fire Emblem, the one with Lyn, Eliwood, and Hector. You put this as third worst, does that mean you hate it? No, I like this game just fine. It's just that all the rest of them are better. I've only played 2 bad Fire Emblem games, and we just talked about them, so from here on out, it's generally positive overall. I really like the glitch where you make an enemy run into a mine, and then you reset the game and you get to play as the entire enemy squad for a turn. You can drop all their weapons, move them closer to you, and off-terrain bonuses. It's a great time. Too bad you don't get that many mines. For more legitimate factors, though, I think the story is solid, the characters are solid, it's just a decent time all around. It's still old Fire Emblem, but like a silver fox instead of a crippled geriatric. Number 6, Fire Emblem Fates. Did this really need to be 3 fucking games? Birthright, Conquest, and the other one. I played and finished all 3. I don't feel like Revelations was really necessary. As you play the other 2 stories, you wonder what it would be like to have a resolution where both sides work together, but in practice it's just kind of meh. I think the Nor family works just fine as the opposing side, since Hoshido are like very clearly the good guys. Plus, they're way more kawaii, so is it even a contest? I know the King of Nar is the only actually evil one, but I felt basically no attachment to Xander, Leo, or the massive-tittied Wyvern Rider, even when I was on their side. Elise was kinda cute, though. But, like, Sakura. Have you seen Sakura? Actually, forget Sakura. Forget any of the royals. Have you seen Setsuna? Setsuna is the best Fire Emblem waifu of all time. She's a hunter who falls in her own traps, or any trap. That's her thing. If there's a loosely covered hole within 100 yards, she'll find it and fall in it by accident like it was on purpose. She just does it for me. I don't know, man. Fate's changed up some mechanics, like making durability no longer a thing. But in its place, it made weapon tiers come with rising stat debuffs, like silver weapons giving lower speed that directly impacts stats in addition to the inherent attack speed loss from their weight, and I just didn't like it. If I wanted to attack twice, I basically had to use iron the entire game unless my character was the Flash. I remember when Fates was getting close to release, the developers did some interview where they bragged that the castle building feature was large enough to be its own game. That's more or less a direct quote. I don't know what they were smoking. That shit was basic as hell and borderline irrelevant. You placed a small array of buildings in a tight, restrictive area. It didn't improve the game in the slightest. If the castle was just a pre-made base with an armory and a shop in it for you to buy stuff between chapters, that would have been more than enough. This shit wasn't Animal Crossing. It could have been its own game. That game would have gotten a 2 out of 10. The reviewers would be like, what is this? And this is a pointless waste of time that probably just serves to artificially lengthen a deceptively short game. Granted, there's 3 of them, but they're short games. You may be hearing all this and thinking, this does not sound like it ranks higher than Blazing Sword, but I value modernization and quality of life improvements to a large degree, and Fate still has most of those, which elevate it above most older titles. And it has Setsuna. It's pretty carried. Number 5, Fire Emblem Sacred Stones. There's really only one reason I like this game better than Blazing Sword. Actually 2. Okay, 3. 1, I think the monsters are cool. They have a decent variety of them and they're fun to fight. 2, the overworld system where you can move back and forth across the map from location to location and engage in battles on previous areas. 3, the Monster Tower. The Monster Tower is such an effective way to grind, which solves the problem many other Fire Emblems have of units falling behind and never being able to catch up. Plus, with each floor being stronger and available at any time, it's just a constant excitement in the back of your mind like, ooh, I'm almost strong enough to tackle the next floor. Ultimately, I care about gameplay above all else, and Sacred Stones facilitates a really fun system of keeping you engaged. Number 4, Fire Emblem Awakening. Awakening was the first game that made supports prominent and convenient enough to actually care about and go for it. Not just because of the marriage and children aspect, which I think is really cool and helps encourage replayability to see them with different hair colors and whatnot depending on who you married, but because you could actually visualize when you were building support on the battlefield with a little heart animation. Being able to check under the hood of otherwise hidden mechanics is always good. Awakening straight up made supports matter in a big way, and it's a trend that has so far continued in the most recent entries. Awakening also introduced the renown point system to even further encourage replayability, although 1 or 2 redeemable items here and there after every playthrough wasn't really enough to bait the hook. Awakening's characters might not have feet, but they still have style. I wouldn't say the cast is particularly strong, but some standouts have become fan favorites, especially since the game didn't mind putting them in skivvies and bikinis with some of the DLC. Pretty easy way to garner some stands. Tharia's daughter, Noir, is my personal favorite. She's a perfect storm of tragedy and comedy, and Robin is still the best customizable main character. Number 3, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. This was the game I played most recently to finish out my experience for this list. I had gotten pretty far in it when I rented it like 15 years ago, but I forgot almost everything, so I dove back in for some fresh perspective. Some people like it better than Path of Radiance. I think it's very similar in quality in most respects, but it dips in certain areas. In this game, classes don't seem like they mean a damn thing. My knights are just as fast as my wyvern riders. Mages don't even really have an advantage against the heavy armor classes anymore because they have comparable speed, and the enemy knights all have decent resistance for no reason. There's been a bunch of changes between Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn in how the classes interact with each other, and it's jarring. For example, Thunder Magic is now super effective against wyverns, while bows do normal damage to them. Super effective damage itself also got super buffed. My otherwise tremendously OP T-Barn Hawk King unit could come up against a rando dude with a crossbow, and even though my defense stat was literally just as high as the guy's might, if he hit me, he was still going to do like 50 damage. It's just different, and your mileage may vary on how you like each individual change. I personally also don't like how they split the playable characters into 3 different factions and you play as all of them back and forth at different parts of the story, because it creates experience inadequacy with your weaker units falling behind and scaling, and it creates experience irrelevance when you're playing characters with people who are already super high level and get nothing for killing anyone. For example, you start the game with Makaya's group in Dayan, like the Dawn Brigade, and I like them. I enjoy their missions, and their characters getting XP is fulfilling until you get to the point where you're playing as Alincia's Crimean Royal Knights for like 3 chapters, and Ike's Grill Mercenaries, whose units are all comparatively way stronger, and story-wise it's all well and good, the lore is neat, and seeing the war from multiple angles is cool, but then when you get control back to the Dawn Brigade, it's been like 6 chapters of scaling without them, and their units are still ass. Most of them would need help killing a single enemy without dying. Yes, you can give bonus XP to units who need it, but it's sparse and doesn't always make enough of a difference. I feel like that shit's rigged sometimes. I tried my best to make Fiona useful. I gave her enough bonus XP for 8 levels at once, and 4 of them in a row were just HP, luck, and resistance. They also starve you for gold and then dangle valuable one-time only items in front of your face that you can't afford unless you want half your units going into battle unarmed. It feels like a purposeful taunt. I played on normal mode, and normal mode felt like hard mode, so I don't even want to know what hard mode is like. Speaking of difficulties, I do remember easy mode being the absolute most painful, suffocating handholding I've ever experienced for such an absurdly long period of time. Multiple chapters of the game forcing you to do what it tells you, every single move for the entire battle. Makes Pokemon Sun and Moon look shackle-free by comparison. I prefer to play most Fire Emblem games on easy difficulty for the extra XP, but I'm not enduring the tutorial for it. So to summarize, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn is just a quirkier Path of Radiance. Fun sequel, but I prefer the original. Number 2, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. This is the best single narrative of any Fire Emblem in my opinion, like minus any branching paths, just a straight shot story that delivers. Great writing, great narrative beats, exciting moments, iconic characters. This game holds up and it always will. I really only have one gripe with it, which I also have for Radiant Dawn, but this game invented the mechanic, so we'll talk shit about it at the source. I hate the biorhythm system. Your character's performance is determined by their biorhythm. It ebbs and flows as the battles wear on. If it's high, then your character gets bonus hit rate and avoid, primarily. And if it's low, then they suffer stat penalties in reverse. And the difference between high and low can be like 20 avoid or 20 hit rate. It's huge and it sucks. I don't want a human component factoring into my tactics. I want to control robots whose numbers don't fluctuate so I can make calculated decisions in a game that will make you restart after an hour of chapter progress because you made a single mistake that got someone killed, or you got unlucky and a few enemies decided to ignore their super low chance to hit, landed some blows anyway, and sent your swordmaster to the morgue. Fire Emblem has made me paranoid. If I can send a unit out in range of 3 enemy units, and it would take all 3 of them landing a hit in order to kill my unit, and all of their hit rates are like 30%, I won't put my unit in that situation. I've been burned before. We've all died to a 1% crit. It's just the cost of doing business. Anyway, Path of Radiance follows the same company of heroes that just gets added to here and there, which makes it much better for scaling and keeping you invested in the growth of your units, and it's just a delight from beginning to end. If I had another complaint, it would be one to levy at most older Fire Emblem games, which is that the conditions for recruiting certain characters can be so obscurely specific that you'll just never figure it out without looking it up. Path of Radiance is guilty in spades. From putting random characters you have no reason to suspect would be the required characters on a specific grid square in the desert for Stefan, to the roundabout way of re-recruiting Shinon that thematically makes sense but still requires a massive leap of logic and multiple steps. I do think the recent pattern of just talk to them with the main character is kind of boring, but there are ways to use context clues so it's not an impossible puzzle either. I think recruiting Zehark by using Leith or Mordecai, who are Lagos, after the previous scene shows Zehark infiltrating a Lagos hunting vigilante group, is a good example of something making sense if you pay attention. But yeah, man, Path of Radiance is super good, especially for its age. Number 1, Fire Emblem Three Houses. I've completed 10 playthroughs of this game. Why? Because it's the best damn New Game Plus I've ever seen, on top of a humongous multi-path narrative with units you've never had more control over and characters you've never had a closer relationship with. The main character playing the role of teacher is just brilliant, training students in weapon levels, taking into account their strengths and weaknesses, shaping them into exactly who you want them to be with more flexibility than ever before. It's a damn trip. And if the next mainline Fire Emblem game forgoes it again, I don't know how it's conceptually possible for them to top this formula outside of battle. Not only does it let you 3D print whatever unit you want from a functionality standpoint, but the process of slowly teaching them and building them up to that level just passively endears you to them in a way that isn't possible in any other game. I only like maybe half the cast conceptually, but the system surrounding them tucks them all under one community blanket of cooperation and mentorship that would probably work just as well with any other characters. Like if the whole cast of Fates was here instead, I would like all of them more than I do in their current game. On the battlefield, everything clicks almost as hard. I think weapon arts are kind of whatever, I didn't use them much, but I like the new battalion system, especially after a few playthroughs when you can have access to the OP ones right out of the gate. And combat in general just feels good, like Fire Emblem at the top of its game. Let's talk about New Game Plus, because it's like 50% of the reason why this game rocks so hard. The Renown system, Awakening introduced, has been expanded beyond belief and can now apply to almost everything. You can use it to buy Professor rank, you can use it to buy previously earned support levels with other students so you can more quickly recruit them to your side if they're from a different house. You can use it to reacquire any previously acquired weapon levels, class mastery skills, and combat arts on any unit. My main character could have an S rank in swords, lances, axes, bows, gauntlets, riding, heavy armor, flying, and every form of magic, all at the same time right after the prologue. Granted, that would be a tremendous waste of renown, but it's a cool flex. Renown is a precious resource at first, but it stacks with each playthrough. So even if you spend it all on your second, your third playthrough will start you with everything you had on your second and more. And I already told you I beat this game 10 times, so my renown is almost maxed out and I can buy pretty much whatever I want. Plus, you can use it to buy weapons if you have the Ashen Wolves DLC. Three Houses just nails the auxiliary stuff. If you imagine the video game Fire Emblem Three Houses as a race car, then all the game mechanics that support it behind the scenes, New Game Plus, the teaching, side missions, monastery activities, etc., are like the pit crew that the car stops in front of when it needs to quickly refuel and change tires and whatnot. But whatever you may think of the car itself's overall quality, Three Houses has the best pit crew of any Fire Emblem game, and it's not close. No other game has this much support and this excellent of support. Being a Switch game, it doesn't run super well, it's technologically limited, and imagining what the graphics could look like on any other modern console gives me jealous nightmares. Like, imagine the anime cutscenes if they didn't have to run at like 10 frames per second, or how nice the combat animations would look if they weren't so pixelated. I really do think Nintendo needs to step up their shit and technology because they make great games that we have to play these neutered versions of. It's not about ultra-realistic graphics, it's about, hey, what if I didn't have to talk to invisible characters in the monastery because their textures didn't load in fast enough. But that's gonna do it for this ranking. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino. Watch all my other videos with your head backwards 180 degrees like an owl, and I'll see you guys next time.